But really, it is a genuine pleasure to be here this morning once again for the Manx State of the Nation conference. This has been going for quite a few years now, and I've had quite a bit of involvement in it, and it's fascinating for me to see the growth of interest which has taken place during that time. And the centre, with the circumstances around us at the moment, plenty to discuss about. And before the professional experts come on, I would just like to talk about a few milestones and change and the sustainability of the island. 2014 was a year which saw two significant milestones on the Isle of Man's journey to development as a leading business centre. The first was the confirmation that the Isle of Man has achieved 30 years of unbroken economic growth. And I think there are very few countries in the world, in fact, that can match the Isle of Man in that record. It is a remarkable national achievement to have maintained growth and confidence over 3 decades, particularly through the global upheavals of recent years, and still to be maintaining a growth rate of 3.6% and unemployment at 2%, with the pressures we've been under, I think is a great testimonial to the work of not just the involvement of government, but more importantly, the work that you as individuals have all put in to ensure the continued success of the Isle of Man. The outstanding resilience of the Manx economy is a result of a number of factors, not least the priority we have given to our strategy of growth and diversification. To have reached the 4th decade of continuous growth might be seen as an excuse to rest on our laurels and rely on momentum to carry us forward. In today's fiercely competitive and ever-changing world, I think that sort of complacency would be a fatal mistake, not just for business, but particularly for government. As we look forward into 2015 and beyond, my message is that economic progress must and will remain the cornerstone of the Manx government policy. We know from experience that we cannot sustain our economic success without working with the island's business community and listening to what you all have to say with us. One of the island's key strengths is the close partnership that exists between the island's private and public sectors. We must all work hard to maintain this constructive relationship for the future, no matter what stresses and strains may appear from time to time. And the second major milestone last year was the signing by the Isle of Man of an historic agreement placing us in the vanguard of countries moving towards a new global standard for tax information exchange. The agreement was signed in Berlin in October by 51 countries committing to share information automatically in accordance with the Common Reporting Standard that was developed by the OECD and endorsed by G20. The island has long been at the forefront of support for a single global standard as the fairest and most effective way of achieving tax transparency. The one point which the Isle of Man has made for the last 15 years in OECD circles and other business circles is that we are absolutely committed to maintaining international standards as long as there is a genuine level playing field. And that is what the Isle of Man has been fighting for, and I think that is what we are close now to achieving. Having one global standard minimises compliance costs for businesses and governments and promotes a level playing field across the jurisdictions. The Berlin Agreement confirms that the Isle of Man really is in the first division when it comes to tax cooperation and transparency, and it underlines our position as a reputable and responsible global partner, and as a further indicator of our commitment to international standards on transparency. And I have to say again that we now conduct regular visits to London to see politicians, businesses and regulators. And only this week I have spent several days in London talking to politicians and business community. And the Isle of Man is highly praised and seen very much as the leader, not just a follower anymore, but the leader in developing of the true international standards that we all look for. The challenge of adjusting to the new world order is the big task in front of us, and it is one that we must address together. In the Isle of Man, we have been quick to recognise the scale, pace and significance of this change. We are working closely with the industry in developing the island's first national risk assessment on money laundering and terrorist financing. Here we are also working in partnership with the World Bank. The National Risk Assessment is preparing for next year's Moneyval inspection of our compliance with the revised FATFA recommendations. This is a very important visit for the Isle of Man, and a great deal of work, I can assure you, is going on behind the scenes to ensure that the Isle of Man gets a good record. In bringing together all the sectors, regulators and relevant government agencies to analyse threats and vulnerabilities, it is proving to be a very useful exercise in its own right. We have also worked with you on major issues such as FATCA, the Common Reporting Standard and the implications of the Vickers report on banking. And on this latter point, I must emphasise the importance and potential seriousness of the matter for the banking industry and the need to resolve the matters as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, one of the problems we do face at the moment in relation to many of these issues is that we have a UK general election in the very near future, and that is, I think, beginning to become an obstacle in slowing down the progress that we want to make to get this final solution. But we are working closely with our colleagues in the Channel Islands to ensure there is a coordinated approach across the 3 Crown dependencies on responding to the Vickers recommendations. We remain committed to meeting the relevant international standards for banking once these have been finalised. But I do appreciate the implications of Vickers when they're finally brought in and the implications that will have for the banking industry. And we may well see over the next few years radical changes in the banking industry, not just in the Isle of Man, but in all offshore countries. And we need to be aware that these changes could come. In relation to the ongoing discussions over beneficial ownership, I am grateful to those of you who engaged in our most recent consultation exercise. We are currently collating the responses we have received, which will then be considered at political level to determine a way forward. I continue to reiterate to our colleagues in the United Kingdom Government that the Isle of Man has been collecting beneficial ownership data for over a decade, in line with FATFA standards. It has also supported law enforcement agencies in obtaining the information when requested. I understand that discussions on beneficial ownership will be on the agenda for the G20 meeting in Brisbane, which is scheduled to take place early next month, and we will be monitoring the outcome of these discussions. However, the Brisbane meeting is very close. It's only 2 or 3 weeks away, and I believe the UK government are trying to get some sort of collective response from the Crown dependencies and indeed the overseas territories to give some sort of commitment to beneficial ownership. So these next 2 or 3 weeks are going to be quite stressful, I think, for the island and the Crown dependencies in coming to a form of words which we can all sign up to without committing to changing the principles which we have lived by for many years. Sometimes it may seem we are engaged in a thankless task. No sooner have we moved to meet one standard or threat and another one emerges. And I hear you when you say that we are reaching too far or setting our standards too high or higher than other countries believe necessary. However, I believe we have consistently been vindicated in the decisions we have taken and that they have served us well. Even Mr. Cameron, a long-time critic, has recognised the work we have undertaken in response to a question in the Commons in September 2013, when he stated, and I paraphrase, "I do not think it fair that we any longer refer to the Crown dependencies as tax havens." Now that in itself might not seem a very profound statement, but when you think where we came from 10 years ago, it is quite a remarkable change of position by the UK government. The world continues to evolve, and we must be seen to be responsive to those pressures. You do not need to tell me, you do not need to tell you that all international finance centres are going through an unprecedented period of change in regulation and legislation. There is still much instability internationally, which has the potential to affect us. And closer to home too, there are also continuing uncertainties. In 2015, we expect to see a new and potentially very different UK Parliament, which will bring challenges, but also new opportunities. With further emerging detail on the devolution agenda in the coming months, I will ensure that we will continue to develop and nurture our relationship with the constituent parts of the United Kingdom. And I can assure you we've been working on these relationships now for some years, and they are now very seriously bearing fruit. And to bear that out, we hosted the British-Irish Council here only a few weeks ago, which was a resounding success and helped us to build new relationships, new friendships and understandings with our counterparts in the devolved assemblies. So we are working very closely and monitoring very closely the changes which are in the pipeline. Following the UK general election, we will be watching this with the same considerable interest, the proposed referendum on the EU and the impact any possible opt-out decision could have on our Protocol 3 agreement. This may seem a fair distance down the road at the moment, but this potentially is a very, very serious threat to the Isle of Man if indeed Protocol 3 is removed, if in fact the UK decide to change its relationship with Europe. Protocol 3, whilst perhaps not affecting financial services so greatly, is vitally important to our manufacturing industry. And if Protocol 3 was to change in any way, that would give us problems in other areas. In 2015, we expect to see a new and potentially very different UK Parliament, which will bring challenges, but also those new opportunities. And as I say, we will continue to develop and nurture our relationship with constituent parts of the United Kingdom, and indeed build and continue to build our relationship with key players in Westminster. And indeed, only this week we spent 2 days in Westminster talking to various parliamentarians, key parliamentarians, business community and bankers. Following the UK election, we will also be watching with some considerable interest. We will also be specifically continuing to build on our partnership with the City of London and the North West, demonstrating we are a key partner for business. Only this week, as I say, I was back in London continuing that policy of engagement. Traditionally, the Isle of Man has very much focused on the City of London, and that's where our marketing efforts have taken place, very much focused on helping you guys, the financial services industry in various forms. But in the meantime, we have tended to forget that we have some very close neighbours in the northwest of England, in Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. And we are now focusing our attention on building new, strong relationships with those areas as those economies develop and their political influence changes. We are continuing to work with our business sectors to open up new opportunities for the island around the world. China is of political interest to us, and following on from what I believe to have been a very positive visit last year, I will be leading another Isle of Man public-private sector delegation there in April of this year. So how is our economy holding up in a climate of major regulatory reform and global change? And I'm pleased to say the answer is very well. 2014 was another good year for the economy, and the prospects for 2015 are at least as good, if not better. However, that said, I could not let go today without making some reference to the very disappointing news we've all had yesterday with the potential closure now of Mount Murray Hotel and the loss of over 30 jobs. Government, through the Department of Economic Development, will be working closely with the company over the coming weeks to support the displaced staff and also to investigate all options for potential new investors in the facility. And I have already had talks in the last 24 hours with potential new investors in Mount Murray to try and maintain continuity of the service up there, because we do realise that whilst we do have good facilities in Douglas, Mount Murray has been a vitally important element of our hospitality industry, and particularly for providing facilities for events such as this. Moving on, there does seem to be a level of optimism. A number of initiatives are underway to build on our successes in line with Vision 2020 strategy for our economic future. We have invested £5 million in supporting the increasing demand for skilled engineers trained on the island through an apprenticeship scheme, as jobs in this sector continue to grow at around 100 a year. E-business remains our fastest growing sector. Government support for the industry includes selling the nunnery site so that it can be developed as a world-class IT training centre. And I do appreciate that there's been some controversy about this in the early days, but I do honestly believe now that the various relationships with the bodies, political as well as business, have now got a much better understanding on what the future facility will look like, and work is progressing very quickly now to try and bring it to conclusion. The regeneration programme is bringing new life to our town centres, and we are now working across departments to unlock the investment potential of key sites in government ownership, in particular the redevelopment potential identified in the recent Douglas Master Plan document, which will be key to this initiative. And this, of course, especially relates to the bus station site and the derelict centre of Douglas. It's something, to me, as Chief Minister, I find extremely embarrassing, where we have one of the most successful economies in Europe, and yet the derelict town centre of our capital continues to let us down. So it will have a priority from now on to ensure that we attract new investment into that area. I share the view that the built economy of a place can have a real influence on economic confidence and activity. So I'm pleased to see that the Isle of Man is at last making some commitment. While the diversity of the Manx economy is a source of strength, the resilience, we should not forget that financial services is still the most important single sector. It is the largest export earning industry, both in terms of employment, providing more than 10,000 jobs, and national income representing 1/3 of GDP. Despite a testing global environment and the continuing evolution of the industry, employment levels in the sector have held up well in the past year, and overall profits have grown. These are encouraging indicators of improving prospects for the future. The island's ability to evolve and flourish has been clearly demonstrated in the past, but we will need to think outside the box if we are to forge new competitive edges for the future. And as if we didn't have enough on our plate at the moment, we are also working towards a merger this year of our regulators, the Financial Supervision Commission and the Insurance and Pensions Authority. Both bodies have been serving the island extremely well under the sound leadership of the respective Chief Executives, John Astlin and David Vick. And I would like to pay sincere tribute this morning to both of them for the outstanding work in supporting both the industry, but particularly the Isle of Man's international reputation for probity and transparency. And without their active participation, I do not believe the Isle of Man would be in the position it is today. But bringing the two organisations together is expected to create a number of benefits in terms of combined strength and efficiency. The merger will be a further milestone on the island's journey, and it is also an opportunity to revisit the relationship of regulations to government and industry. Government must ensure that it maintains an awareness of the commercial needs of industry, and that continues to operate in harmony with the relevant level of regulation required for our jurisdiction. It really is important for members to fully understand that whilst we may be merging the two regulators, it is absolutely paramount in my mind that they still, whilst providing high quality of regulation, are fully conscious of the commercial needs of the Isle of Man, the absolute need to be flexible in developing new niches in the financial services industry, and work with us all as a team to ensure that the Isle of Man moves forward coherently and competitively, to ensure that regulation does not swamp out opportunities which come for the future. So when I look back to when I was elected as Chief Minister, the journey began with the identification of this government's three key objectives: balancing the budget, protecting the vulnerable, and our key strategy, the absolute central strategy of growing the economy. This I have always stressed as fundamental to the success of any government, and even more so when you realise that we also started from the point where we had to deal with the loss of 1/3, or £200 million a year, of our VAT income. And as time goes on, it's very easy to forget what the starting point of all this is. We hear a lot about government cuts, government changes, government downsizing, but do not forget the huge challenge that the Isle of Man has had to face in adjusting to the loss in very short order of 1/3 of its income. £200 million is a lot for a small island of 85,000 to recoup. So it has been no easy task to deal with the pressures this created on the public finances on the island. And standing here today, I can reiterate that we are on course to rebalance the government's revenue budget this year. We have the island's annual budget next month, in 3 weeks I think it is, and I think you will find some positive news in that budget, which will give you some reassurance that, notwithstanding the pain and the discomfort and difficulties we may have created over the last 3 years, we are actually bang on target for rebalancing the budget this month, and that will be 1 year earlier than we initially anticipated. So we are very pleased and proud of the progress that we've made during that time. But it has been no easy task to deal with the pressures this created on public finances on the island. And I do believe that the majority of people now do fully understand why we have taken these steps. But we still, even with rebalancing the revenue budget, there is much work to do in rebuilding internal funds and reserves. So whilst we are rapidly approaching the new landmark, a landmark I have to say personally I'm very proud we've been able to achieve, the work has not ended. We have to rebuild the reserves and we have to build in internal funds. So the tight control on government spending over the next few years will have to continue. But that will be eased by your efforts. The more we can grow the economy, the faster we grow the economy, the more revenues are generated for government, and the quicker we'll be able to finally replace the reserves and the internal funds. And I have to say that achieving savings on this scale is something that no previous government ever has had to face up to. It has been an exceptionally difficult and at times very challenging process. But we have stood firm. We have resisted the easy option and ongoing political pressure to make the Isle of Man's tax position less competitive. And I would warn you that there is a political view that the easy way to get out of the problems that we have at the moment is simply to put up tax, whether it's to remove zero corporate tax or personal tax. Personally, I am absolutely committed to maintain the tax structure as it is at the moment. It is a competitive edge that we need to maintain growth in the economy, and I hope very much we will be able to maintain that. But in the long road, we are making progress in the direction of modernising the public sector, slimming it down, and making services more sustainable for the future. Throughout this process, we have reduced our full-time equivalent posts across government by nearly 700, and for the first time in several years, seen an overall reduction in gross government expenditure. And in 30 years that I've spent in government, this is the first year we've ever been able to manage that. So it's been a bit like the super tanker, slowly slowing things down, but we've actually finally got there. And I think all these small items building together should be cause for optimism for business and for the island generally, that we are on the right track and we will deliver what we promised. So change is happening at home and abroad, with the departments of the Isle of Man government as well as in the spheres of international finance and regulation. The point is that we have to engage with change in order to secure sustainability for the future. That is as true for the economy as it is for public services, and we are very well aware of that. But finally, I can give you my absolute assurance as Chief Minister that we will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with the business community to ensure that the island's continued safe passage through these difficult times will continue. We have done it before, we've done it successfully before, and we've done it on the back of all our own efforts. We haven't had outsiders coming in with magic wands resolving these issues. This has just come through hard work, cooperation between government and the business community, and a general agreement on the vision of where the Isle of Man has got to go to. So we can be proud of where we are today. And as I've said, we have done it before and we can do it again. As the national motto says, whichever way you throw us, we will stand. We've had a battering over the last few years. We have been thrown and tossed and turned in international turbulence and finance turbulence. But we are still standing, we are standing strong, we know where we're going, we are in control of what we need to do, we have the finances back on track again, the economy is still growing, unemployment is falling, and overall, over this next few years now, we should be able to get the island back on track again. So, with your help, working with government, we can all achieve this. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for giving me the chance just to say a few words this morning, just to give you a very brief summary of where the Isle of Man is, where we're going, and my optimism that we are going in the right direction. There will be a few bumps along the way, I'm absolutely sure, not least the fact that we have a general election next year, which might change completely, but I still believe overall we are doing the right thing. So thank you for your help and cooperation, and thank you for your invitation to come along here this morning. Thank you.